Hey guys, welcome to another walk.
Hi.
We thought we would talk about all the different trucks we've had and what we thought was good or not so good about them and why we've changed trucks a couple of times in the last few years.
Yeah, so we thought it was a good time taking a walk to chat with you guys.
Hey there, I'm Kelsey, that's Tim, and this is the story of our adventure. Life is fleeting, and we want to squeeze every bit out of it. We are wandering the world, so home is a bit of a moving target for us. We love finding the random, the remote, and sharing it all with you. So subscribe to get lost with us and hopefully find some inspiration to go after your own dreams.
Okay, so first truck since we've been doing videos is Goose. And Goose was set up with a clean roof, sleeping bed platform on the inside.
Yeah, Tim actually had Goose before he met me.
Yeah, so Goose was about 10 years we had him. And our favorite setup, we sometimes said, was that early setup with clean roof. We had our spare tire because it was too big to go underneath on the back.
Yep.
A couple of jerry cans for range, and then a water can. Sometimes I'd switch one of those out with an old jerry can I converted into a trash can.
Yeah.
And we just loved that setup.
We slept inside, yeah.
Fridge was actually beneath the bed. It was short enough. And it was just such a clean setup. It wheeled so good.
Yeah.
Now, that setup wasn't that great for traveling the world because there wasn't much room.
Yeah.
But for what we were doing at the time, a week in Baja, maybe I think a week and a half was probably the longest trip with normal jobs.
Yeah, I'd say, tops 2 weeks at most.
Yeah. And so that truck was just so good. You could pull all the internals out and it was just a normal 80 series SUV that could commute to work.
Yep.
Or you could leave it all in and you're always ready to go. And I just love that.
Yeah, I loved that setup. That by far is my favorite setup as far as just enjoying camping.
Which is funny because it's also mine. And so for the wheeling side of things, that truck was so great. It was so low center of gravity. You really felt like you could do anything with it.
Yeah.
So that was our favorite setup. And we say that because in the US, with what we were doing, it was just so dialed. I had had so many years to tweak it. It was perfect.
Yeah.
And it was actually closer to stock than most trucks I've ever owned.
Yeah.
Even though it may look really built, that version of Goose was pretty mild, I'd say.
He had good suspension, bumpers, and
you know, you already
what
had
else
lockers.
Did you have? Yeah, lockers.
And so, you know, that was sort of done. I built a drawer system in the back and then had a hinged piece off the front that was the front part of the bed platform. The fridge sat beneath that and was sort of locked in place, and it was just simple.
Yeah.
That truck was great, but we knew as a home, living out of it, you're essentially living in a small lay-down space, like a tube.
You're living in your bed.
Yeah, really. And so we knew that in the western U.S., Mexico, the weather's pretty good. You don't get a ton of rain. You don't get a ton of negative 20-degree days. And so for that, it was perfect. But what about once we're in the Petén jungle of Guatemala and there's millions of mosquitoes, everything outside is mud, the rain never stops, and you're stuck in your little bed, basically, unless you put on a poncho and get out and just sit in the rain. So we knew we had to modify it. So the version of Goose with the pop top, the Camp Tech, was really the best setup I think you can do for an 80 series to live out of, short of cutting the whole thing back. But we'll get to the Maltec and the Maltec style box trucks soon. So with the Camp Tech, we added standing room. Now, most of the time you would just leave the bed in place. Our Camp Tech was one of the early prototypes. Essentially, there was only, I think, 7 of them. Eric can correct me on that if I'm wrong, but we had one of the prototypes. It was pretty trashed, and so the only pieces that were original were really the top piece of aluminum and the bottom piece. The hinge, the struts, the tent material, the bedding, the insulation on the roof.
Yep, the headlining and all that, everything.
Everything was done by us. So it took a lot of work, but it turned Goose into a much more livable home. And that's why we made that change, because as soon as you're truly living out of a vehicle, full-time, no real breaks, except maybe a flight home to see family or work, you really need a different vehicle than you need to do an awesome week in Baja, right?
Totally.
And so for us, it was just time to change Goose into more of a rolling home that could still wheel. But the primary focus was home.
So I would say the biggest things I would have changed about our setup, changing Goose to have a Camp Tech, was making sure that we had an option to sleep without the top popped. I say it wrong.
Yeah, totally.
Because bad weather, it's really cold, you're somewhere where it's really loud, all
You're not
those
allowed
things.
to camp, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, and you want to stealth camp in the back of a truck.
We really wished we had thought about that and made a way, even if slightly inconvenient, that we could comfortably sleep downstairs.
Totally.
And we call it downstairs. And we didn't have that. And then the other thing that was a bummer with the camp deck is how heavy it made Goose more top heavy. So he just didn't wheel as well after that. So good, but it definitely changed that.
Yeah, it changed his driving characteristics. And again, it's actually a pretty light option compared to, we had a front runner roof rack we briefly put on Goose because I gave up on trying to find one of these rare 7 camp techs that weren't in production anymore. And so I put a front runner roof rack, which is aluminum, supposed to be light. It was really heavy though. And then on top of that, I put a alu cab shadow awning. Great awning, love it, but again, very heavy. And so if we had then put a rooftop tent on top of that, and fuel, and max track, and solar panels, it just wouldn't have been a truck I really was excited to drive in.
Made it across the water.
Water in the desert. So for us, the Camp Tech was definitely a better and lighter way to go. But as Kelsey said, it was still a lot heavier than it used to be. And it took, for me anyway, some of the joy of driving away from the truck.
For sure. And then the other thing, the downfall of it was getting to standing room was not very convenient because there was nowhere for your bedding to go, really.
Yeah.
So if you did get standing room, it wasn't very much standing room. So really, we maybe moved all of that out of the way a few times, but not often.
Mostly it was in place. Now ours, you have to picture very different design. Wood slats laying in place all the time with the bedding on top of that. Now, you know, sort of like an alu cab and the other pop tops, I believe all the Camp Techs are on gas struts. The bed goes against your ceiling, instant standing room. That's a huge upgrade. Huge. So for us, that would have been a big change.
Yes.
So that's why Goose was great. But after two and a half years of living in him, it just felt like you were in a little tiny tube, sort of like we were worried about before we did the Camp Tech.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating because we like to be remote. We don't want to pay for campsites. We don't want to go and stay in a hotel very often.
And it was a tight,
needed to be a
tight bed too.
Yeah.
I mean, you're always going to be a little bit tighter, obviously, than like a king bed or something in a truck,
but
which we're fine with. But you are
touching
us. I mean, we're not super big people, but
yeah. So I would say if you're extra tall or wide or bigger, it could be tough.
It would be.
We were touching arms every night for 2 years, and we never killed each other. But sometimes you just want more room when you're laying in bed.
Yeah, especially when it's cold and you're, you know, whatever arm is on the outside, you're touching the outside, basically. You have a little layer of fabric between you and the outside world, which is good sometimes, and other times not so much.
Yeah, when the weather's nice, that's great.
Yeah.
But when it's really cold, that's where that downstairs bed option would have been much nicer.
Really nice.
And we failed in that regard in thinking it was important enough. We thought it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And we really regretted. We wish we had a downstairs bed. So that's basically why Goose didn't work out for us as much as we had hoped.
Yeah.
It was great for what it was. It was better than a stock 80, certainly, but it, in some ways, was a detriment because of the lack of a downstairs bed.
Yeah.
And the one other thing, just a footnote, because we get a lot of questions on the gasoline versus the diesel. I did love the diesel truck. Nothing wrong with it. For world travel, I love the diesel.
Yes.
In fact, I'd even forego the turbo and do the slow, lowly 1HZ because it's fine. I've driven a lot of them. I like the 1HZ.
Yeah.
Where I don't like it is in the United States or Europe, where people drive 80, 90 miles an hour. The rest of the world, people just trundle along nice and slow.
Yeah.
The road sometimes has a pothole in Central America or South America that's big enough to swallow your truck.
Yeah.
So you don't go 60 or 70 on a curvy mountain road because you might die.
Yeah. Putting along is the speed that you're generally doing.
Yes. So I do love the diesel. That being said, for the folks with the gasoline 80s who want to do a similar trip, do it.
Yeah,
that
we had no problems.
Reliable. That engine is amazing. We didn't change cap, rotor, spark plugs, spark plug wires, fuel filter. None of that changed. And we did, by the time we got it back to the US, we were just under 100,000 miles of traveling, which is crazy. It just became actually hard to find a cab and rotor and plugs in some of these countries, which seems crazy, right? But when we were remote and I would ask at a Toyota dealer, they said, yeah, we'll order it 60 to 90 days, we'll get it in. And as an American, you go, 60 to 90 days. No, never mind. And so he kept running good, so we didn't worry about it. That engine, Goose, was driving at 19,000 feet in elevation on Mount Unturuncu in Bolivia, as well as, just below sea level at Badwater Basin in Death Valley. So that engine is great. Its drawback, it's a gas hog. We spent most of our budget in traveling over the years on fuel.
Yeah.
Because Goose is thirsty. And although we complain about gas prices here in the US, they're cheaper than most places besides the Middle East.
Yep.
Or a subsidized country like Bolivia.
Yep.
So I would say don't worry about it. It's a great setup.
Yep. Absolutely.
Next truck,
Dusty.
Dusty was the dream truck, is the dream truck actually.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it. Downstairs bed was wonderful for all those nights when it was freezing cold in Alaska, or the winds were kicking up when we were on some mountain in Turkey.
Totally.
And it was just such a great setup.
Had a perfect upstairs bed, perfect downstairs bed. It was very livable for the size that it was, and still really capable.
Yep.
Not heavy. All the weight was low.
Yeah. It looked top heavy, but it was actually less top heavy than Goose with the Camp Tech. And so it was a better wheeling truck if I had thrown 35s on it. The drawbacks of Dusty. Well, having that diesel, even a powerful diesel like the 1HDT with a bigger turbo like we had, it doesn't cruise that fast. So going down the road with the gearing as it was, and I had 393 gears, which is the fastest gears I think Toyota put in an 80 series. 65 was about it. You could do 70, but you felt bad. You were spinning the diesel pretty fast. If you had to pass, you could do 75. But again, you're getting worse mileage and you feel like you're spinning this engine that's supposed to take you around the world a little fast. So that's a drawback, but that's really only for the US and Europe.
Yeah.
Everywhere else,
it was
perfect.
Perfect,
speed.
yeah.
So that was one drawback. The other one is the diesel costs a lot more to maintain. Do diesels last a lot longer than a gasoline truck? Yeah, I believe so. But it always needed a little more love. And the parts were expensive.
Yeah.
So for me, in that sense, the 1FZE is just such a simple gas hog.
Yeah.
But simple and reliable gas hog. So that was another negative, but not a big one, I'd say.
No, I think the biggest downfall of Dusty for us was his price.
Yep.
And that's what stressed us out the most about Dusty. And because you can't really insure a truck like that properly.
Even in the US.
Even in the US, it's hard.
Insured. So we're driving around knowing that even in the US, if he is stolen, burns to the ground, is sideswiped by a semi, we are out an amount of money that to us is an extreme amount of money.
Yeah, so we just found that it was so stressful. You want to go hike a mountain, but you're scared to leave your truck down, in the parking lot, or you're scared to go on this cool off-road trail because if you damage it, it's a big deal. Yeah. And so I think that
was the main thing. If Dusty were magically 30 grand, why not, right? It's the ultimate truck.
We'd keep them. Nice car that we're walking.
We'll talk about that one in a second. So it was a cost thing, certainly. I would say the last negative, and this isn't a hard one, but the way he looked, and you can change the way a Maltec or any box on the back of a truck looks, is very tactical.
Yeah.
And I could feel a difference in the way locals treated us. We tend to be very remote, and the people in very remote areas are usually very poor. And in Goose, he just looked like a beat up, dented, dirty truck.
Yep.
In Dusty, it looked a bit military, and most poor people of the world have been messed with by someone, the government, some mining company coming in, tell them to move. I mean, something like that. So I just felt like we got a different reaction, still always positive, but a bit aloof, a little scared. And so if I could change one thing about Dusty besides his price, it would be just to make him look more like a boring old truck, maybe that looked like a delivery truck, just had a delivery box in the back or something. So that's about as much negative as I could think of about Dusty.
Yeah, I think so. He was, so far, the best traveling, living out of platform I think we've had or found.
Absolutely.
And we really loved him. It just, for us, there were other factors that stressed us out, we realized once we had him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think looking back on it, we don't regret getting rid of him at all. And like we said, if it was money is no object, it's such a perfect travel truck. But we also realized having a super cheap truck when we did that trip to Tunisia and we were in the giraffe colored Troopy, it was kind of a piece of junk, but it was great. It was absolutely great. It did everything We got out deep into the Sahara, going over dunes.
Didn't really worry about if we were on a ferry and there's a guy on a motorcycle and the ferry like ran into the wall when we were docking.
Yeah.
And it knocked him over on his motorcycle
Into
the truck. And I thought, oh my goodness, if that was with Dusty, I would have been so stressed out.
Yep.
But with this, I was just like, oh my gosh, are you okay?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's fine.
So it's nice. And we realized that if you're traveling for months at a time and not years consistently, who cares? Get in a normal SUV, go travel, get a hotel when you're sick of the truck, get an Airbnb, whatever. But you can solve it pretty easily, pretty cheaply. Which brings us to the Old Man Beige,
Yet to be
beautiful
named.
giant water buffalo of a truck. The Golden Goose, the Spruce Goose, the Pony Boy. I don't know what we're calling them yet, so we'll see what sticks. But brings us to a 2008 200 Series Land Cruiser. I get that it looks new to a lot of folks compared to what we've owned in the past, but I realized it's the same age Goose was when I bought him, 15 years old. So it's kind of old, but I agree with you. It's very modern for us.
We have a lot of modern technology that we have not had before.
Yep. So the pluses. I don't have to rebuild everything on him. You notice with all the other trucks, there's nothing broken, but when you're going to leave a country and go into 20 other countries, I don't want to have to find a mechanic that knows my exact model vehicle. Bush mechanicking in all these countries is great. They'll get you moving again, but I just wanted to take care of it so it was fresh. So I replaced every rubber bit, every seal, every bearing, etc. And it takes weeks and months and thousands of dollars. So one reason we chose this is because it's just a thing. It's just a more modern truck, not in need of all that work. So that's easy. Two, I actually, for a lot of the overlanding we do, a 200 is better at it than, certainly better than a 70 series. Certainly, I would have to say even better than an 80, although I still believe 80s are a better built truck. I'd say that was the high watermark with Toyota, them trying to impress the world and probably spend too much money on a vehicle. But the 200 is very well built still, and IFS is great for overlanding. You're not rock crawling, and so IFS rides better. It's a nice riding truck. So for us, this is just a more modern thing. We can build it mildly. It can do American highway speeds, and in the go fast stuff like in Baja, IFS is actually nicer. Prior to Goose, I had a 4Runner, 3rd gen, had all the nice suspension from the companies I used to work at. Before that, I had a long travel, total chaos, long travel, big shocks up through the bed, pre-runner Tacoma, and IFS is really nice. And if you know what you're doing, you shouldn't be blowing CVs apart. So for us, it's kind of purposeful for overlanding, right? And traveling and exploring the world. But where it's not actually good at exploring the world is fuel usage. So that's why this truck to us, we're not saying that this is our new travel the world vehicle, because it's not.
No.
When we're traveling the world, we're going to get something in country now. So if we go to Australia, land of Land Cruisers. If we go to Africa, also a land of Land Cruisers. We'll get something simple and reliable there, like a 70 series.
Yep.
Which is great at slowly overlanding. My only point in saying it wasn't as good, by the way, for those already typing a comment, is it's got the flex of a skateboard. It's not really an off-road weapon, but it can take the abuse.
Yes.
And that's why I love it. Like the one we drove in Tunisia, it wasn't a cushy ride. It wasn't a nice ride.
No.
It didn't articulate.
You're driving a delivery truck.
But it was still fun, and you just go slow, kind of like our FJ40.
Yeah.
I don't care that our FJ40 doesn't have flex. I don't care that it doesn't have lockers. If I can't get up something, I roll back and pick a different line 3 or 4 times. And if it can't get up it,
Yeah.
well, we take a different trail.
And if you're looking for personality, I think the 70 wins.
Absolutely. I love the 70 more than any other vehicle, even with what I would call its shortcomings.
Yeah.
This truck right here is just so practical for us.
Right now.
For right now. For what we're doing right now,
Yeah.
which is Mexico, US, lots of mapping work, some training work.
Mm-hmm.
This is just such a good thing. And I actually do love it because it's got some of that simpleness of a Land Cruiser.
Yeah.
But it's got a lot of
The
modernity.
practicality, but
to-
modern.
Yeah, to do the
Yeah.
speeds on the highways you need to do. The fuel usage is definitely the worst.
Yes.
But so far we found, now you can see it's got a little lift on it from our last video. We're still getting 16.5 to 17 around town when I'm careful. And on the highway, we're still just about cracking 18.
I just wish we got the diesel engine in this one.
Of course, that'd be nice. But you know, it's just a good truck for what we're doing. And it's something that if we need to get to Florida for a job or up to Washington, this truck can do it. No big deal. Dusty and Goose could do it, but it's a long drive in an older truck with sort of loosey-goosey suspension and an engine that doesn't really want to do 80.
Right, and the market right now, frankly, too, when we were looking, trying to decide what we were getting, it was like 80 series especially are so hot right now, so popular that you're getting basically something that has 300,000 miles that we need to do tons of maintenance. Possibly the engine is almost done. And it was the same price as this, essentially. So,
and after owning our Dream 80 series, well, two of them, both Goose with the clean roof was my Dream 80 series US spec, and I'd happily own that again. Or Dusty was my Dream 80 to just do it all around the world. None of the 80s looked that attractive. I was looking at rusty ones. I was looking at ones that need a ton of maintenance, like months worth of my time trying to get it up to sort of the level that Dusty and Goose were at. So to me, they all just look like work, and the price was too high for what they were. The price on these was too high as well, but that's why we look for one in the least loved color that we like, Old Man Tan, Sonora and Gold. And we also looked for one that maybe wasn't advertised well. And this guy had put one ad on his Facebook page, not in any groups, not on Craigslist.
Yeah, and it came up weird, like you could only find it a certain way. It wasn't like you could just type in Land Cruiser or 200
I think
series.
you use Land Cruiser as one word and like a few other little things that made it hard to search for. And in the end, the interior was also beat up. So if you're looking for a nice 200 series,
this wasn't it.
This one doesn't feel like you're spending your money on your sort of nice car. Like you don't want your coworkers, if you're an office person, to get in this one.
You're like, oh.
They go, yeah, geez, what happened here? So for us, it was perfect. And that's why this one was $24,750 for a 150,000 mile truck, always in California.
All the maintenance records,
And so I would say of all the trucks we've owned, this thing is perfect for us right now in what we're doing. But is it the perfect world travel truck? No, I don't think so. I think that you can do it. There's a couple doing it right now, and they're shipping off to Australia recently, I think. But they've had some issues finding parts, and it's just such a gas hog that to me, it's just not what I want to travel.
And it's also not simple. I mean, fixing anything on this is not, there's a lot of electronics nowadays. And,
give me a 1.8 Troopy any day.
Absolutely.
For slow, mellow world travel. And the way people react to an old Troopy is great too. It's so non-offensive and non-threatening. This truck is just awesome for what it is. And we're having a good time.
We're loving it.
So that sort of summarizes all the different trucks we've had recently that you guys have seen, at least on YouTube. And why we switched so much. And I would say not that much really.
Yeah, you didn't see Goose for that long.
Lulu was the green 4Runner pictured here. That was 7 years before Goose. And then Dusty was 2 years. Tonto is going on 8 now. And then the Porsche 911 was 6 years, I think.
I think,
when we got rid of them. So we do tend to keep cars for a longer than normal time. Dusty was the least, but he was such an extreme amount of money for us. We were driving around in, you know, a liability for us anyway. So
a lot.
But hopefully that brings you up to speed on our crazy decision making.
My battery just died. Our sound is going to get worse.
Our sound just changed, so now it's GoPro sound. Get rid of my mic. So hopefully that brings you up to speed on our thoughts on the different vehicles we've had, why we've had them, why we switched. And we can't really tell you what we're up to next, except a lot of fun Baja, some work, and then some exciting adventures planned that we're not ready to share yet. So stay tuned, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching.